Welcome. Our discussion today. Who are the people groups that made up hip hop culture? That's our discussion for today. Remember, tune in tonight as we have our year in review, Hopology year in review. Please tune in tonight. But our topic on the table right now is who are the people groups that made up hip hop culture? This is going to be a history lesson. So I'm usually just going to give some people some time to get up in here. But tune in tonight. Welcome to the chat. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to my channel, Hopology, the study of hip hop. I'm your host, Dr. Derrick Colon. Let's give some people some time to get up in here. While I'm waiting, let me give you some great resources that you need to have. And give you some great resources that you need to have. Forgive me for going over here. I'm kind of grabbing them, right? This right here, and again, it might look backwards, but this is a great resource by Raquel Z. Rivera. This is called New Yorkers from the Hip Hop Zone. A great, great book. You can see Dr. Rivera did her homework. A great resource. Here's another great resource called Yes, Yes, Y'all. While I admit there are some great things in here, there are some errors in this particular book. Another great read. This is by Jim Frick and Charlie Ahern. Yes, yes, y'all. This is a great read. This is actually, let me make sure I'm saying this right. I want to make sure that I'm getting this right. This is actually a collector's item. This is by a name called Boo Hooray. Boo Hooray. And it is about the life and times of Africa Bambaataa. This is a collectible item, flyers, personal interviews. Not many people can get this. Of course, my book, Son of the Ghetto, telling you my personal story. Of course, here's the seminal work by Joe Conzo, Born in the Bronx. This is actually the expanded edition, beautifully signed by my brother, Joe Conzo. Beautiful piece of work right here. We have another seminal work by Martha Cooper called The Hip Hop Files. Want to get this great book. Last but not least, the great work by Martha Cooper and Henry Chalfant, Subway Art, a great, great magazine of the graffiti trains in New York City. So, those are some resources that you might want to get your hands on. So, let's talk a little bit about who were the people groups that made up hip hop's culture. These are not things that I've not said before. Please like, please share, please subscribe. Okay? And so we don't start this Splinter movement, which is really a splinter movement that comes out of the gang era. Okay, the gangs, specifically of the 70s, this comes out of the gang era. Gangs like the Savage Skulls, the Savage Nomads, the Ghetto Brothers, the Black Spades, the Peacemakers, the Mongols, the Seven Immortals, and numerous others, the Chingalings, numerous others. So it comes out of that gang culture of the late 60s, early 70s. So again, the thesis is, who were the people groups? That's not the thesis. I'm sorry. That's the statement. Who were the people groups that made up hip hop's culture? I'm not really going to pay attention to the chat because I'm teaching right now. Remember, tune in tonight. Tune in tonight as we will be doing the 2025 year in review. Now, the reason for this teaching is because there are those who are trying to change the story dramatically. Okay. So we talk about the gang era, comes into the 70s. Then we have this really pivotal moment within gang culture that doesn't change gang culture, but there's a shift that happens. And that happens when Black Benji from the Ghetto Brothers is murdered. Now, there are those who believe it was members of the Mongols, it was members of the Black Spades, it was members of the Seven Immortals. Okay. So the streets were up in arms. And Karate Charlie wanted revenge. And so they decided, we're not going to do that. We're going to have a peace treaty meeting. And that happened in the year 1971. Pay attention to the content that we're talking about. Pay attention to the content. 1971 at the Hoe Avenue Boys Club in the Bronx. There was a peace treaty meeting. And if you watch the film and the footage of this meeting, you will see that the majority of the gangs within that meeting were New Yorkers of Latino descent, probably primarily Puerto Ricans. These are facts. We're not making this up. Back to the original statement. Who were the people who made up hip hop culture? Okay. In this meeting, you see Bam Bam, the supreme warlord of the black spade. You see Disco King Mario, who was just known as Mario in that meeting. You see Hollywood was representing. So this meeting brought about this certain level of peace. It did not bring peace across the board. That's not true. But it brought a certain level where now gangs will be able to walk into certain areas. And again, it wasn't across the board. There was still gangs who were rumbling. But certain gangs will be able to walk into certain areas rocking, flying their cut sleeves, flying their colors. The Ghetto Brothers are responsible for holding outdoor parties to foster this idea of peace. Again, it wasn't perfect. And so when you watch the Rubble Kings, you hear Yellow Benji talking about how he had the Black Liberation flag right alongside the Puerto Rican flag, symbolizing the wanting of unity within the gang culture, not within general society, but within the gang culture. Understand that. And a couple of years later, now there are many within hip hop's culture who believe that that meeting, that those outdoor parties, those block parties, those outdoor events would foster in, was the inception, was the beginning of what would come to be known as hip hop culture. There are those who would say this. Now, we get now to the 70s. Again, the premise today is who are the people groups that made up hip hop's culture? Who are these people? Is it one people group? Is it two? Is it three? Is it numerous? Who are these people groups? And if we're talking about the Bronx, we can't talk about the Bronx and ignore the people groups. That's just anthropology. But so we have this party that happens. Now keep in mind, there was always block parties, there was always basement parties, there was always apartment parties. But there was a specific party that takes place in the year 1973 at 1520 Sedgwick Avenue. Now, let me start by saying that party was not a hip hop party. The term hip hop is not even a thing yet, but that was not the energy that would be associated with hip hop. It wasn't. There wasn't enough people to even fit in that room, right? Coke LaRock says the lights were on. Both Herc's parents were there. His mother and father were there. It wasn't that kind of party. I talked to Dancing Doug about this. He says, no, it wasn't that kind of party. But that would be what I would call the conception. This is when it was conceived. But the birthing of it, now this is what's problematic. We have, these terms that we use, the birthing. And when somebody gives birth, They're giving birth to something that is, born. But because it's born doesn't mean it's developed in its full capacity yet. It's simply birthed, it's born. Okay? So 73 would be the conception. The birthing would be more like late 74, 75. And there are those who would say real hip hop begins in 77. I hold 75. But again, it's not full, it's in its infancy, it's a baby. Okay, it's not fully developed. So the baby is born in 75, but it starts to begin to make its initial voice, its initial talking around 76, 77. Okay? It's born in 75, it's moving in 75. It's starting to move. Now it's talking around 76, 77. Right? But it doesn't get its name until 81, 82. It doesn't get its name. Hip hop culture. Now, we think culture, we think ethnicity, race, nationality, people group. No, this was a subculture that came from the streets of the Bronx. That's what this was. Nothing more, nothing less. It was a subculture. Now, before the 80s, there were splinter groups within the subculture. In other words, there are people who say graffiti is not part of hip hop's culture, or it was not initially, and they're right, it wasn't. It was a splinter group. It was not connected to hip hop. Graffiti begins in the 60s in New York City, and it doesn't even begin in the Bronx. It begins in Washington Heights. So, with that said, you do have people that would be associated with the culture will come out of the graffiti movement. People like Who Herc, people like Phase 2, okay? People like the other flyer maker, oh my gosh, slipped my name. Somebody remind me. Okay. But these are the people that would come. But it's not initially part of the movement. Why? Because there is no movement yet. There's no movement. So while we hear people like Scene and people like Lady Pink who say, we weren't listening to rap when we were listening to rock music while we're bombing trains. The problem with those kind of terminologies is there is no rap music in the mid 70s. Rap music doesn't come out on records until 79. And we're talking about rap music that is associated specifically with hip hop culture. We're not talking about people who rhymed on a record. Let's be clear about that. So these splinter groups are happening. Graffiti being one. The DJs being another. Now, again, there are DJs all over the city. We're specifically talking about the DJs who specifically played a certain type of music that would be known as B-boy music. Okay, this is who we're talking about. That begins with cool DJ Herc. That begins with people like Grandmaster Flash. That begins with people like Africa Bambaataa. That begins with people like DJ Breakout. That begins with people like Mean Gene. Okay? Those are the people, and many more. But people initially followed the blueprint of what was happening. I'm not going to entertain the Grandmaster Flowers story. I'm not going to entertain the Pete DJ Jones story. I'm not going to entertain the DJ Hollywood story, because those people wanted nothing to do with the movement. Let's just be honest. Okay. Now, the DJs were a splinter group, but they were playing for a specific group of kids that would be known as B-boys. Herc coins the term B-boys. He calls his dancers B-boys, specifically A1 B-boys. But these B-boys were not breakers. They were burners. There is a difference. The breaking era does not begin until late 74, 75, and it did not begin with Herc at the Hevalo. It began in the Bronx. There were already breakers before they got to the Hevalo. So who were these breakers that we're talking about? The Bronx Boys Rocking Crew, 1975. The Zulu Kings, late 75, 76. The CC Crew, 75. Star Child La Rock, 77. The Rockwell Association, somewhere 78, 79, and there are some that might say late 77. Okay. And there were others, TDK, and there were others. Okay. Now, I'm not focusing on whether these people were Black or Puerto Rican. We're talking about who were the people. That's who we're talking about. I want you to talk amongst yourselves. Give me 1 minute. I need to make a pit stop. Give me 1 minute. Talk amongst yourselves. Okay, I'm back. Thank you so much. So what we're saying is that the B-boys now are among themselves. I don't know if you knew this. I saw this with my own eyes. That B-boys did not necessarily, and listen, I said this 1,000 times. I never heard the term B-boy. In 75, when I first saw it, I heard the term breaking, not break dancing, breaking, going off, floor rocking. Okay. I've seen this plenty of times where the floor rockers, the breakers, did not necessarily even need music to rock to. If they're practicing on the sidewalk, if they're practicing in their hallways, they didn't always have music. They're just practicing. So we have the graffiti writers, a splinter group. We have the DJs, a splinter group. We have the B-boys, the breakers, a splinter group. And then we have in late 76, 77, some would even say 78, the MCs. All of these splinter groups hung with each other. Graffiti writers with graffiti writers, DJs with DJs, B-boys with B-boys, and sometimes it would overlap. And then when the MCs came, it would overlap at the jams. Okay? But the original jams did not have MCs. Okay? They did not have MCs. There might be people who were on the mic and saying little phrases, but that's not what we're talking about. But these are splinter groups. The culture of hip hop is not a thing yet. These are little subcultures within New York City, Bronx culture, and Manhattan culture, if you're including graffiti. That's what this is. But it's not until the 80s, the early 80s, where Bambaataa codifies this, brings it under one umbrella to say this is a culture. This is a culture that has art. This is a culture that has music, sound, breakbeats. This is a culture that has dance. This is a culture that has emceeing, rhyming, poetry. This is the culture. Now, the question really rises: who were the people who made up this culture? And I suggest to you that there were three specific people groups that made up this culture: Black Americans, New Yorkers who were of Puerto Rican descent, and New Yorkers who were of Caribbean or Jamaican or Barbadian descent. Okay? You did have some who were Dominican, you did have some who were Cuban, you did have some who were Caucasian, you did have some who were Panamanian and Costa Rican, but the majority were Black American and New Yorkers who were of Puerto Rican descent. That's who makes up the people groups of the culture that we called hip hop in the 80s. Now, this doesn't happen in the 80s. This happens in the 70s. Because here's what I'm saying to you. If you want to try and repaint the picture and change the history by saying we didn't rock together, we didn't get along together, we didn't like each other, we were separated, then you have to explain the gang culture, because it's within the gang culture that you see Black and Puerto Ricans together. Okay? You see in the Black Spades from the beginning, Black and Puerto Rican. You see in the Savage Nomads, Black and Puerto Rican. The Skulls, Black and Puerto Rican. The Ebony Dukes, Black and Puerto Rican. These were some of the largest in the city. Let me say in the Bronx. Bronx. I don't know if you know this, but the leader of the Young Spades for all of New York City was David Santiago, Tex DJ Hollywood, Tex D, the leader, the supreme leader of the Young Spades for all of New York City. He just so happened to be a Puerto Rican. So this new narrative now that's being pushed by people who are not native to the culture. They're not from New York. They're not from the Bronx. They didn't live there in the 70s. They didn't witness this. This is what's being pushed, this new changing of the guard. And so the job, I don't want to call it a job, but the charge of this channel, as much as we can, is to properly document the history, and that includes the who, the what, the when, the where, and the why of this culture. Okay? History does not change. Okay? Truth does not change, lies do. Okay? Lies do. So when we have these new groups of reporters coming out and saying really ridiculous things based around something they themselves never lived, they themselves never saw, they themselves never witnessed. Okay? This is what we're talking about. Okay? This is what we're talking about. Now, for those that want to really learn and listen to the story of the culture, you're going to really go through the playlist and the videos on this channel. And I want you to really see, it's not enough that you watch 5 seconds of it and then you make a determination. That's not how this works. Watch the information and listen to it. That's all you have to do. That's all you have to do. Just watch the information. You know, there's this big thing with Herc, and Herc wasn't this. And listen, when you have Cool DJ D on record in the Troy L. Smith interview, type in online Troy L. Smith interview Cool DJ D and Tyrone the Mixologist. Type that in. Cool D says, in no uncertain terms, Herc was before Mario. But so what? In the interview, actually, it was a text message conversation between Charlie Rock and Tex D. Just listen to the conversation that is on my channel and listen to what Tex is saying. He's just quiet, but listen to what he says. Listen to the interview that I did with Bambaataa. I know certain people have feelings about, okay, we're talking about the history. Just listen to his interview. There was never a time in the Bronx that we were separated to the point of enemy status. No. No. And those who are claiming to be from New York and are claiming to have witnessed this with their own eyes, I don't know what part of the Bronx you were in. Did we have fights? Yes. Did people have fights among their own kind? Yes. That happens. That's humanity. But that doesn't mean that we were not people. That doesn't mean we were not one family, one people, which we were and which we are. But those from the Bronx and those from New York know. If you know, you know. That's all there is to it. Shout out to my channel members. Hit that like button. This is a history lesson to get rid of all these false stories. So I just heard another story that I'm like, wow. You know what? I'm going to leave that alone. When you talk about the history, pardon me for wiping my nose. When you talk about the history of hip hop, you have to talk about the people groups that were involved. Okay? The people groups. This is just fact. You can't talk about Africa Islam, who is half Puerto Rican, by the way, and not talk about Ed LaRock, who is Puerto Rican. Look at the flyers. Ed LaRock, Africa Islam. On the everywhere you saw Africa Islam, you saw Ed LaRock. You know, I just watched the eulogy and the funeral of super rocking Mr. Magic, John Rivas, who's actually his real name is Juan Rivas. Okay. As they're reading the eulogy, you hear the naming of their parents. I believe the father's name was Angel, the mother's name was Carmelita. Okay. Now, I do believe his mother was of African American descent. But when I spoke to Fly Ty Williams about this, and when I spoke to Fly Ty, he thought this was absolutely ridiculous. He thought it was ridiculous. Rest in peace to Fly Ty. We just did a little, honoring of him the other night. Please go back and watch that. We had some very special guests on the show. But when we talked about this, he said Magic was raised as a Puerto Rican in Bushwick, Brooklyn. You know, it's funny that we find it so hard to believe that nobody but one can be. No, that's not the case. That is not, and that's the beauty of this. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful thing. So, yes, the official voice of hip hop culture was a Puerto Rican, Sir Juice. So when we try to go back in time and try to make up these stories and try to dismiss people and do you know that there are now people who are saying that both Herc and Bambaataa are actually guests in the house of the culture. And they're only doing this for one reason, because of their Caribbean ancestry, which is sad. It's sad. But today was about who are the people groups that made up hip hop. And I surmise to you, you can't go back to, and I'm not talking about what people want to try to portray as proto hip hop, the 30s, that ain't got nothing to do with hip hop. Not a thing, anything. We're talking about the 70s and beyond. There will never be a time where you don't see us together. Now there were some jams that people went to and they said we just didn't see them. That might have been the neighborhood you were in. That might have been whatever jam that was. But hip hop nah, man, listen, man. The culture doesn't start. First of all, there is no culture. These splinter groups don't start in clubs. They start in the streets. This is a street movement. From graffiti writing to DJing to b-boying to MCing. It's a street movement. It doesn't go from the clubs to the street. It goes from the streets to the clubs, to the spots. So you talk about the T Connection, which there were Puerto Ricans in. Which you talk about the Hevelo, which there were Puerto Ricans in. Which there were Latinos in. Nobody mentions Mom and Pop's Disco, ran by two Puerto Ricans. Where some of the hottest b-boys hung out. That's where the b-boy hubs were. Nobody talks about 118, 129, St. Martin the Tours. So I am personally done trying to explain this. Oh no, we were there. You know what? Let the work speak for itself. 2026 is going to be about that. Let the work and the information speak for itself. And if you still have that in your heart, that's between you and God. I don't have nothing to do with that. Let's see what the chat's saying. Yeah, Jim G. Plenty of, spots. And listen, man, I don't want to call these black spots and Rican spots, and they were hip hop spots. They were hubs for the culture. That's what I'm saying. Yes, and that is correct. DJ Smokey, you know, listen, I don't know when his Smokey begins, but I know that he said he had Puerto Rican B girls. I don't know what that looked like, right? I don't know what that looked like. I have tried to get an interview with Smokey. Unfortunately, if you don't have the money, you ain't interviewing him. So that's good. It's all good. It's all good. Yeah. The mighty Hebrew needs Jesus. That's who the mighty Hebrew needs. He needs Jesus, big time. I don't entertain that. But anyway, I pray you got something out of this today, right? Gonna make sense of this. And that's what I'm hoping to do. Tonight, right? Tonight, T Breeze, he says Bam is doing interviews. Well, T Breeze, he did an interview for me. And that was a blessing by way of my brother Whip a Whip. And I'm gonna leave it at that. Yeah, I'm gonna leave it at that. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, so let me see. Let me. I wanna hang out for a minute and see what the chat is saying. Def Rocker says, were the terms breaking and burning used interchangeably? Yeah, at a certain point they were. They were, yes. But the burning era is the pre-breaking era, right? The burning era is the up top stuff, the mushing of the face, and really, if we're really honest, that comes from rock. That comes from the rock dance. Okay, and people say, "Well, we never saw that." Well, you think you never saw that, but you saw somebody who saw somebody who saw somebody who saw somebody who saw somebody do it, and you think, "Oh, that's where it came from." No, it actually came from way over here. But it's New York City, so yeah, they were used interchangeably. They were used interchangeably. But as for me, I'm not gonna continue to entertain. I'm gonna talk my truth. I'm gonna talk my junk, and that's it. But I'm not gonna continue to entertain. Oh, what did Puerto Ricans bring? I'm done answering that question. Watch the content. That's what I would say. Shout out to Truth Teacher in the building. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Truth, you do your thing, man. Go get that money. Go get that money, Truth. So, yeah, tonight we're going to be showing some videos that were featured in 2025. We're going to be showing some events that were happening in 2025, and how the culture is still being pushed forward. And that's what we're going to do. We're going to do that. But yeah, man, listen, I'm out of here. I'm going to go relax for the rest of the evening, for the rest of the afternoon. Grace and peace. Love you guys. Please don't forget, subscribe to the channel. Remember, we're doing our 50K subscribe campaign. 2026, we want to get to 50K, y'all. And this is for the main purpose of pushing the content out there to more people. There's not a lot of people really seeing the content. We want to push it to more people. So please, if you can, if you support the channel, please send this, share the channel with 10 people that you know would appreciate the history of hip hop. And ask them personally, please hit the subscribe button. Please hit the like button. Please hit the share button. If we do that, that goal can go beyond, right? And for the express purpose of pushing the content out to more people. Okay? More people. All right? Peace.